He didn't even bother to look up from the screen. "Yeah," he muttered. "Dad said it was time I had something decent for class." My chest instantly tightened, and a cold feeling spread through me. "Class? You're taking classes now?" I asked, my voice strained. "Yeah, some extra programs. Gear. Supplies. They said it's an investment," he replied, shrugging, tapping the keyboard like this extravagant gift was simply owed to him. "You know how it is." I did know. I knew too well. Mom smoothly slid the freshly cut carrots into a simmering pot and gave me a warning look. "Ava, be supportive. He's at a very important age. You remember how you were back then." "I worked after school," I replied quietly, a painful lump forming in my throat. She simply waved the thought away, dismissing my entire teenage effort with a single gesture. "That was your choice, and you turned out fine." It wasn't just the words themselves that finally cracked something deep inside me. It was the tone, the absolute, unwavering expectation that I would simply swallow everything, again and again. For their sake. Later that evening, the house grew quiet. Mom had gone upstairs, and Noah had disappeared into his room to play games on his brand-new investment. Dad walked into the kitchen. He opened a drawer, rummaged around for something invisible, and then slammed it shut with a careless, final thud. I watched him, searching his face for any flicker of the familiar, loving father I remembered. "Dad," I said, trying to steady my voice. "Can we talk about my savings account?" He didn't flinch. "What about it?" he asked, his voice neutral. "There's money missing." "A lot of it." Still no blink. "We used it." My breath caught violently in my throat. "Used it for what?" "For your brother," he said, stating it as a simple, undeniable fact. "He needs chances, opportunities, things you didn't." I stared at him, trying to reconcile the man I saw with the father I knew. "I didn't need opportunities." "You're already working," he replied, completely devoid of emotion. "You're stable. You're fine. Noah's future simply needs more support." The way he delivered the entire explanation, cold, logical, like he was calmly explaining the pattern of the weather, made something deep inside my soul shift. My whole life, I had stretched myself thin, trying desperately to be invisible, to avoid becoming a burden. And here he was, telling me that the stability I had achieved through years of hard work actually made me less deserving. That I don't remember what I said next. Perhaps nothing at all. Silence, that familiar enemy, was the only armor I had left, and it felt dangerously thin. But later that night, while they all slept, I couldn't rest. Driven by a terrible instinct, I crept to the kitchen and checked the drawer Dad had opened earlier. Inside, tucked beneath a stack of old takeout menus, was a manila folder. A folder with my full name printed neatly across the tab. Inside were forms, applications, and legal paperwork. They weren't just taking my savings, they were actively preparing to open a small, personal loan under my identity. My hand started to shake violently, but it wasn't fear that coursed through me anymore. Something much sharper, much colder, had taken its place. This wasn't a sudden mistake. This wasn't an act of desperation. This was a calculated, premeditated plan. And in that terrifying, dark moment, I stopped being afraid of them. I barely slept the rest of the night. I lay wide awake in the claustrophobic silence of my small apartment, listening to the old heater click its mechanical rhythm on and off. My mind was a whirlwind, replaying every painful moment. The hollow emptiness of the account balance, the smug glow of Noah's new laptop, Dad's calm, heartless confession, and finally, the proof, the paperwork hidden in that drawer with my name printed across the top. By morning, the heavy feeling inside me had transformed. The fear was still present, but it had completely changed its shape. It wasn't a paralyzing blanket anymore. It was a focused, sharp point of resolve. I drove to my job on complete autopilot, the passing city outside my window appearing in muted, washed-out colors, while my thoughts began to stitch themselves into a plan of action. During my lunch break, I met my friend Lily at the cafe near my office. She took one look at my pale, exhausted face and frowned. "Ava, you look like you haven't blinked in 12 hours, she stated bluntly. I told her everything. Quietly, carefully, the same way someone slowly unwraps a deeply infected, old wound. Her eyes widened in genuine horror as I spoke. Ava, that's not just messed up family dynamics. That's genuinely illegal, she whispered across the table. I know, I whispered back, my voice dry. But they think I won't do anything about it. Are they right? I didn't have to answer. The silence that followed told both of us the simple, undeniable truth. Not anymore. When work finally ended, I didn't go home. I drove directly to my grandpa's house. He lived in a quiet, peaceful neighborhood on the distant edge of a city, the kind of place with tall, ancient trees and spacious front porches that creaked slightly in the wind. He opened the door before I even had the chance to knock fully, his eyes instantly narrowing when he saw the desperate, haunted look on my face. What happened? He asked. Without preamble, we sat in his comforting living room, the air thick with the smell of old books and dried pine. I laid everything out on his coffee table, the missing savings, the exact transcript of Dad's words, the chilling evidence of the loan paperwork. He listened without interrupting me, his jaw tightening more and more with each devastating detail I revealed. Finally, he exhaled a long, heavy breath. I knew they favored Noah, he admitted, shaking his head slowly. But this is taking advantage of you, Ava. They're counting on you doing exactly what you've always done, staying quiet. You can't let this go, he said, his voice firm. No, I agreed. You absolutely cannot. We spent the next hour meticulously going through the bank statements I had printed, the long list of payments I didn't make, the dates of the withdrawals, every single missing dollar accounted for. Grandpa moved slower than he used to, but his mind was still incredibly sharp, still fully engaged. You need to document everything, he instructed, his finger tracing a line on the paper. Every transfer, every single missing dollar. Keep copies somewhere safe, far away from here. I already started, I told him, feeling a small surge of strength. He gave me a slow, proud nod. Good. As I gathered the piles of incriminating papers, he gently touched my arm. A family that truly loves you doesn't use you as a resource. They don't drain you completely dry and then tell you to smile and be happy about it. You don't deserve this, kid. The words hit me harder than I expected. I had spent my entire life trying to ensure I wasn't a burden. I never once imagined my parents would actively turn me into a source to be exploited. When I drove home that night, the city lights looked fundamentally different to me, less like scattered, innocent stars, and more like purposeful, focused signals. I sat down at my kitchen table and spread out all the cold, hard facts, the bank statements, the transfer details, the various bills, and the ominous folder with my name on it. Then, I organized everything into a clean, quiet, and formidable pile, not yet for a spontaneous confrontation, but for the exact calculated moment when my father would least expect it. And I knew exactly when that moment would inevitably be. My parents always liked to host these elaborate, large family dinners whenever Grandpa visited. They claimed it was a way to make the house feel warm and full, but it always felt intensely staged, like they were merely performing a perfect version of the family we had never actually lived in. When Grandpa called to confirm he would be in town that weekend, Mom immediately began planning one. She asked me to come early to help, but I declined. I arrived precisely on time, the damning folder tucked securely inside my bag. My heartbeat was steady, stable in a way it hadn't been in weeks. The moment I stepped into the living room, I knew the tension was thick enough to cut. Mom moved around too quickly, nervously adjusting napkins and straightening plates that didn't need any adjustment. Noah was sulking visibly in a corner, scrolling distractedly on his expensive new phone like he was trying to physically disappear into the upholstery. Dad, calm and collected as always, stood near the kitchen doorway, hands shoved casually in his pockets, his expression totally unreadable. Grandpa sat deliberately at the head of the dining table, his cane resting beside his chair, his eyes sharper and more focused than ever when they met mine. Something in my chest clicked, settling into a firm resolve. The dinner itself started almost comically normally. Small talk, the gentle clinking of silverware, the heavy, comforting smell of roasted chicken mixing with the faint, sterile scent of the citrus cleaner Mom always used. But the atmosphere was stretched painfully thin, taut in auto tear at any second. Dad cut into his food and glanced over at me, attempting an easy, normal conversation. Heard work's keeping you pretty busy. Yeah, I replied, my voice even. It's been steady. Mom quickly jumped in to reinforce the image. We're so proud of how independent you are, Ava. Not everyone your age manages that kind of stability. I almost laughed out loud at the sickening irony, the bitter taste sitting heavy on my tongue. Then Dad said it, just like that, without a single pause or warning, his voice deliberately loud. We spent your savings on someone better. The room immediately collapsed into a deep, heavy silence. The kind of silence that doesn't echo or bounce off the walls, it just presses down, physically suffocating. I felt Grandpa's slow, heavy gaze move from me to Dad. Noah froze, mid-chew. Mom set her fork down too fast, the metal clattering loudly against her ceramic plate. I swallowed, once, hard, better than me. Dad'd blink an eye. Your brother needed support. You didn't. It's simple, Ava. Simple. A word like that should never, ever be used to justify a deep and profound betrayal. I didn't look away from him, meeting his gaze directly. That money was mine. Every single dollar. I worked for every penny of it. You'll be fine, he insisted, brushing the air with his hand as if physically shooing away a bothersome fly. You're responsible. You're strong. No one needs more guidance. Grandpa abruptly pushed back his chair, an abrupt, loud scraping sound that cut straight through the tense silence of the room. He stood slowly, but with a presence that suddenly filled every available corner. Name that someone, he said again, his voice lower and steadier than before. Dad opened his mouth, but whatever came out wasn't confidence. It was a panic cleverly disguised as irritation. Dad, this isn't your business. We handled things the way we saw fit. That's clear, Grandpa stated. Too clear. His gaze flicked to me, and I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. My hands, surprisingly, didn't shake this time. Every page inside felt like an anchor, not a burden. I brought something, I announced calmly. Dad's jaw tightened, sensing his control slipping. Ava. I laid the papers on the table, spreading them out for everyone to see. Statements, withdrawals, payments, bills. Dates lined up precisely, like a formal, written confession. The last page, the loan paperwork, sat starkly on top. Mom's breath hitched in her throat. Where did you get all that? It was in your drawer, I said, my voice completely steady. The one you thought I'd never check. Noah finally leaned forward, confusion and a dawning horror spreading across his face. Wait, this came from her account. Dad snapped, trying to regain control. You needed those classes, Noah. Don't start acting ungrateful. I didn't ask you to take her money. Noah shot back, the first genuine crack appearing in his entitled voice. Why would you even do that? Because you deserved it, Dad said sharply, his frustration boiling over. Ava doesn't need expensive things. She doesn't need the same opportunities. She manages on her own. She always has. Grandpa slammed his open palm on the table, not hard, but with enough explosive force to instantly silence every single voice. That, he declared, his voice pure ice, does not make her less deserving. It makes her exploited. Dad's face was flushed a deep red. Dad, you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, Grandpa countered. You took her entire life savings without a word. You then tried to open a significant loan under her name. You intentionally put her entire future at risk so you could keep this ridiculous pretense that Noah is helpless. Mom whispered, a frantic sound. We were just trying to support him. At her expense? Grandpa asked, turning his sharp eyes back to me. Ava, speak plainly. What exactly do you want to happen now? It was the first time in my entire life that anyone in that house had ever asked me that question. I breathed in slowly, gathering every bit of courage I had. I want my savings returned. Every last dollar. And I want the loan paperwork destroyed, by your hands, not mine. Dad shook his head violently. You're overreacting, Ava. You have a job. You'll replace it all in a few months. Grandpa cut him off, his voice uncompromising. She won't replace what you stole. You will. Dad's expression shifted instantly, first overwhelming anger, then genuine, flickering fear. Mom's voice trembled with a frantic edge. We don't save that kind of money, Dad. Not right now. Then you'll adjust, Grandpa said, his command final. Sell something. Cut back. Figure it out. Because if Ava files this stack of documents as a financial abuse report, the consequences for all of you will be far more significant than whatever hardship you face repaying her. A long, suffocating silence followed, heavy, unavoidable, and completely final. Finally, Noah spoke, his voice quiet, small. Ava, I'm sorry. I didn't know. The apology didn't fix anything that had been broken, but it mattered deeply that he finally said it. Dad slowly sank into his chair, looking like all the air had been suddenly punched out of him. Fine, he finally managed, speaking through clenched teeth. We'll return it. All of it. And the loan? I asked, pushing the final point. He swallowed hard. I'll shred it. Tonight. Grandpa nodded once, the gesture satisfied and complete. Good. Then this family might still have a chance. But I knew better than to trust that. Some damage doesn't ever undo itself. It simply becomes a line that you vow never, ever to cross again. I stood up, gathering my folder with all the documents. I'm going home. No one, for the first time in my memory, tried to stop me. For the first time in my life, leaving didn't feel like a cowardly act of running away. It felt like a powerful, deliberate step into the life I was finally choosing for myself.